Okay, we're at the Atlanta History Center. This is the Dubose Gallery. This is the War Between the States exhibit. Okay, you'll notice a fair amount of revisionism as we walk through. There isn't any museum of Civil War history that doesn't have some revisionism, but it's minimal. I found some really interesting factual statements in here. Here's a good one right here. And as long as you present the facts, everything else is superfluous. And here's another good example of that. So as long as you've gone to that extent, the facts speak for themselves. Finest museums of the era that I've ever seen. Exhibits, I should say. The museum covers a bunch of different topics, but this is their crown jewel easily. They have taken great pains to give an example of all the various firearms that were used, and they've been fairly successful in that. However, they've used a lot of reproductions, but they don't try to hide any of that. They tell you when something isn't original, they say it's a copy. So that's, can't ask for much more than that. This is really neat. I thought this Johnny Reb is either modeled after or somebody thought it was a joke, but it looks just like Robert Redford, which I'm sure pisses off the entertainer himself to no end, being depicted as a Reb. But I mean, that's spitting image of a 40-year-old Robert Redford. I'd like to think that's somebody's idea of a joke, because it cracks me up to no end. And here's a good example. There's these firearms, and some of the sabers, swords, etc., are copies. And it tells you whether they're copies. None of these are copies. These are all original. They don't say that any of them were fired in the war, but they do say that in some cases some were, in this service or that service, or shipped here or there. So that's kind of neat as well. Each little subsection broken down into, camp life, cavalry, artillery, infantry, etc. So here's a good example. They have some of these are copies. The rest of it, the flags, the boots, etc., all that is all original. There's an old battle flag. Frock coat. That flag is from Drury's Bluff. Captured at Drury's Bluff, I should say. These are various infantry shoes, socks, undershirts, etc.
Go outside and find the animals.
Well, I don't believe it. How about, where's Mom and Dad?
There's some really extraordinary exhibits in here. We'll see in a few moments. I thought it was really interesting. Where you turn, there's a neat little nook or cranny. They have the logbook from the CSS Shenandoah, etc. There's just really neat, authentic, original stuff. These are almost all copies, except for these stocks. These stocks were left over at the armament company. This is really neat. This is a bullet mold. I don't even know how it worked, but obviously it got squeezed together and the lead poured in and that sort of thing. Really neat stuff. This is a diorama, obviously, of a woman working in a munitions factory that would have been hand wrapping each one of these. It came in a, like you see here, a paper cartridge. The mini ball would have been in there, but it would have had to have been broken open. The paper was wadding, and then the bullet went down into the barrel. So each shot would have been cumbersomely, if that's a word, ripped open, and only assuming that your powder was dry, which was not always the case. Again, some of these are copies, some of these are not. These, as far as weapons are concerned, everything else is straight up legit. Accoutrement, pouches, buckles, etc. More weapons. Again, I like how they've taken pains to present a full example of weaponry, even though they went to the extent of using copies. Here's a Henry repeating rifle. That's legit from back in the day, as is the one above it. In fact, I believe all these are legit, straight up. Here's a neat little Henry, or rather Spencer pouch, carrying the bullets. This is really cool. This is the largest ordnance collection in the world, projectile. The Thomas Swift Dickey Civil War Ordnance Collection. Thomas Dickey started collecting ordnance when he was a little boy. He grew up, his home was near the southern rifle pit line or defensive line of Atlanta, and he started finding ordnance, and then after he grew into adulthood, he just started going crazy collecting them. So that was his passion. Very cool. This is a diorama of a parlor. I guess it could be north or south. It really wouldn't matter. That picture in the back is a famous painting of the death of Latinay. But this shows the grieving women on the home front. And this is an example of a temporary marker, as you know, they would have been reinterred to some place up north or wherever they were from. They would have gotten, or rather more permanent markers would have been in place. This is really neat. An original 1863 scarf. And it's interesting to me who all they choose to show. You got Davis in the middle, Lee, Beauregard, Morgan, and Johnston in the corners. And inside you have Mason and Slidell, Semmes, and Joe Johnston. I'm sorry, the Jackson is the other corner. But it's interesting that at that time, that was who they, later on, you know, those people, some of those people, those players would have changed in terms of prominence. Very cool stuff, very cool stuff. I like this huge picture of Atlanta, since that's where I'm at, and I'm studying that right now, that area of the campaign. Here's a wagon. It's the Conestoga's, the supply wagon. I don't know how the Conestoga's differed in that respect, but these are original field guns. It doesn't say if they were fired in battle or not. This I thought was really neat because Atlanta utilized a lot of defensive trenches. As we know, trench warfare began in the Civil War. And they dug them by, you know, the miles, the tens and hundreds of miles. This shows how the logs were laid, horizontally laid down and covered with dirt. On top would have been the head log to protect the head of the shooter. Of course, the musket shooting. And here, I'd never seen this before, never even heard of this, but this is, and I forget the name of it, it's called a slip log or a slip pole or something like that, and it makes perfect sense. But if this was blown off, it landed onto this and protected the heads of the people below, because once they fired, they would go down below, you know, reload, fire again. Really cool stuff. Here's a neat little thing on it, little kiosk or whatever sign on it. Skid pole, they called them. Yeah, skid pole. Really neat. Really, really neat. And it shows you all the, you know, the ways of having done it and everything. Of the gabion, which is a wicker basket filled with dirt stacked up. Really cool stuff. Caisson and cannon. And here's some, there's a sharpshooter display. I think all of these are legit as well. British made rifles. British at the time were much better rifle makers, I believe, than even the Americans. Even the Federals did not have the precision or technology of a long, you know, a gun able to shoot a long way. Over here, see this part. This is artillery on the other side. We've already seen the other side of that. These are all uniforms and swords used in the Atlanta campaign. This is Walker's saber. Walker was shot and killed by a sniper's bullet during the Atlanta campaign, and yesterday we saw a fort named after him. And this is supposed to have been the flag that flew over the city. This is the national flag. It is enormous. It goes way down, another 3 or 4 feet down to the floor. It's the original flag that flew over the city of Atlanta. National flag. And this is a federal flag. This is a tent flap carried by an Ohio volunteer. This is another national flag, 33rd Texas Cavalry. This flag was never surrendered. It's exciting. This is one of the most exciting things, I think, here. This is the logbook from the Shenandoah, the SS Shenandoah. And the final entry is in July of 1865. The men had been at sea for over 10 months and did not come to know of the end of the war until July, and at that point they feared imprisonment. They had no idea. They found that out in San Francisco. Nothing was really reliable at that point in San Francisco, so they sailed it to England and turned it over to the British. And it's the last entry is November 5th, 1865. So it would have been 6 months after the end of the war that they surrendered it. And that's legit. $670,000 Americans, and the South is to this day not recovered from that devastation. And here's some basic news blurbs of what they think, what the people who curate this museum believe. This is an example of the brand. This is the Branch Brothers collection. All brothers served. One brother got killed. The other two lived on and rebuilt their lives. And this display is supposed to show you that they're putting their uniforms back into a cabinet and getting back to work. And then finally, this is this little statue guy here, and there's some signs that talk about the end of it all. So this is pretty much it. We're just going to shut it down and head on out.